thing will light up when you're.
All right, you've got 4:07 and you're live.
Okay, well, you are all of us here together on April the 12th for the Community Advisory Board Review Committee meeting. And I'm Mark Drenick chairing, and I'm going to call the roll. And Luke Murphy.
I'm here.
Len Carson.
Here.
Dave Risberger.
Here.
Okay, we're also joined today by Katie Butker and Lieutenant Witzenberg. We've also got a couple of members of the Common Council, John Rafter, I see, and we have Mayor Herzig here. So welcome all of you. This is the Community Advisory Board Review Committee, and I just want to preface this meeting with a quick statement. The Community Advisory Board, Luke and his fellow members spent many hours in development of recommendations to ensure a safe and well-considered delivery of services, that's policing and mental health and support and more for the community as we move forward. And it's the review committee's charge to consider each recommendation, to honor the intent of the CAB, to determine what can be done and what cannot be done. And for those recommendations that cannot, that we have a clear understanding of the legal, contractual, or other impediments that may be involved. This is why we're joined today by Personnel Director Katie Butker and the Acting Chief, Lieutenant Witzenberg. It's also the reason that the committee has compiled a list of recommendations that require legal opinion. And we've shared that with the city attorney, the city prosecutor, and the defense attorney. And we hope to have the results of the review of those legal questions at our next meeting. With that, our process is going to be to take each proposal individually in turn, and we're going to ask for the input of the personnel director and the acting chief, and then ask for input from the attending council members. And at that point, the committee will engage in discussion and we'll vote on the inclusion of the recommendation in the final plan. Now, look, if there is anything other than a unanimous vote, then what we're going to do is we're going to ask that advocates of both sides of that question join us in a follow-up discussion at some point during the coming weeks. And at that point, we will determine whether or not by vote of this committee that will be included in the final plan. Timelines will be determined for all the recommendations included in the final plan at a later date. But what we're going to try to do is plow through. So that makes sense to everybody? All right, good. I appreciate the thumbs up. Luke. All right, so with that, and there was a wonderful, by the way, 139 pages that was shared with everybody, and I asked the folks on the committee if you'd have an opportunity. Yes, Lieutenant Witzenberg.
Can I ask that you send on a copy of what you've sent to the city prosecutor and defense to the district attorney's office?
Certainly. Carrie, could we take care of that?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Anyway, so this committee was asked to take a look and review this 139-page document. I presume most everybody has. We'll probably reference it at varying points throughout, but let's dive right in, all right? And that works for everybody. Okay, all right, so diving right in, we're gonna start at the top, and we are in the very first category, which is transparency. And with that, I'm going to read this, and then Katie and Lieutenant, I'm going to ask you each if you have an opinion that you weigh in on this. Okay. So we're going to start with the board recommends that the Common Council formally enshrine positive policies such as Chief Brenner's laudable policy against creating any form of quota system and any future use of using OPD as a mechanism for revenue generation. And let me have Lieutenant, I'll let you weigh in first.
Quotas are illegal across the board for law enforcement. They're not a tool that's supposed to be used. And there have been issues where police departments have gotten themselves into trouble because they follow some sort of a quota system. I think what this is referring to, and I would hope that maybe Luke, you can clarify to me, but in Ferguson, they had an overzealous city manager that was using the police department as an alternative means of revenue generation for the city. So I think that's more of a statement that the city government should be making, that the police department won't be used as a tool to generate an additional tax upon the populace.
Dave?
Yeah, is that a state law that makes that illegal?
Quotas?
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure it's federal.
federal law? Okay, I just want to make sure if it's written somewhere, then we don't need to worry about it, in my opinion.
All right.
Quick search.
In the meantime, Katie, is there anything that you would like to add to that?
Not on that initiative. Thank you.
All right. So John, I know you're in the gallery here, and if there's something that you'd like to say on the subject before this committee discusses.
There is not,
Okay, very
especially
good.
since it's on, if it is a federal law and it's not something that can be done legally, I'm fine.
All right, very good. All right, so with that, I think we can have some discussion among the committee members. Anybody want to weigh in? Luke?
From my recollection, one of the statements behind this was mostly to ensure that a lot of policies, given the abrupt departure of our previous chief, the initiatives that were going on under his watch kind of get continued and written down. Not to say that they aren't, but just ensuring that it's written down somewhere to make sure they get written down, if that makes sense. I think if I recall correctly, that was the intent behind it. And Lieutenant, I believe you're correct as well. Kind of put that guard in place, whether it be on the council side or on the police department side. I don't think we were entirely sure, so that's why it was included with the language it was included under. Just to make sure that there isn't that conflict there if the city's trying to raise funds through using the police to tax people, essentially.
Very good.
So New York State Consolidated Laws, Section 215A is discrimination against employees for failure to meet certain ticket quotas. There is a labor law standard against having a quota for officers.
All right. Any other discussion among our committee members? Len, Dave?
So at this point, are we to understand then we can just draw a line through this recommendation and not include it? Because there's already laws that the officers are following that preclude this from ever happening. So it's not a Chief Brenner rule, it's a state law.
Mm-hmm. Luke?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that was just an example of it. You're right; it is a Chief Brenner policy. And going back, there were a couple of things that, and unfortunately, I can't quite remember. This is early on in the process. Some of the policies that Chief Brenner discussed that he brought in just to make sure those continue. And I apologize; I don't have that's buried.
Luke, I think that was in regard to New York State traffic safety requiring a certain number of tickets to be written by an officer a day for whatever overtime that they were going to be reimbursed for. But I'm pretty sure that we've stopped accepting that grant money.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Lieutenant.
All right. Do we have a recommendation among the committee that we in fact cross this off as something that we don't include in the final plan because it winds up being redundant? Does anybody want to make a motion in that regard? Len?
Dave, did you want to comment on this or?
Yeah, I mean, my knee-jerk reaction is to say we don't need this, but then I know that perception is can be problematic with a lot of things, even outside of the conversation we're having here. And I'm wondering, and Chief, maybe it would be better for you to chime in on this, give us your thoughts. But do we need to take something like this where we don't need it, but it may be better for the public to see it written somewhere?
Again, I think
policy?
I think that in this regard, it would be,
because some people think this happens. I mean,
well, I think that the issue again is that the police department should be protected through some sort of language that says that the like city manager or city council or city government won't use the police department as a revenue generating arm. And that, what we're here for is to generate compliance through voluntary means and if need be through enforcement, but that's not necessarily the primary goal. The issue I think is overzealous enforcement of a community, and that ends up being part of what separates the police from the community is this idea of overzealous enforcement for the specific purpose of generating a new tax revenue stream.
So if we were to say something akin to city government will not use OPD for revenue generation via quotas or other means, that would it would take care of the language here that would make you comfortable, Chief, and would also send a message, Dave, to the general public that in fact that's what we're saying. Quotas or anything akin to that would not be something that the city government, never mind OPD, would be sponsoring. Yes, Len?
I would be in favor of that.
As would I.
Yeah, same here.
All right, so
Could I,
Mark, I also want to acknowledge that Councilmember Harrington is present.
yeah, I saw that. Scott, I'll bring you into the discussion on the next. We've set up this so that you'll have plenty of opportunity to chime in. Okay, sound good? All right. So shall we? So there's a motion then on the floor? I guess I'll make that motion if you don't mind. And that is that city government may not use OPD for revenue generation via quotas or other means. And have we had the discussion essentially? Second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so that's a unanimous pass, and that goes into the final. We have our first recommendation that hits the final. How about that? All right, moving on now. And Scott, because you joined us late, let me explain what we're doing here. I have both Katie and the lieutenant here because these things, generally speaking, are directly relevant to their opinions and input, and we want those. So we're going to ask them for their input, and then we're going to open that to both you and John, who are present here as council members prior to our going into discussion and vote. Sound good?
Yeah, I've been here since the beginning, but probably your tablet hasn't seen me. So
Yeah, that could, you know how you are, Scott.
that's all right. Thank you, though. I appreciate it.
No worries. All right, so we're going to go right into this, the second one. The board recommends that the Common Council instruct OPD to develop Know Your Rights resources portal that is easily accessed by visitors, linked from the OPD website. And Katie, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this first, if this is something, in fact, that you feel you should.
Well, I'll try to stay in my lane here as the personnel director, but I think in general, after having participated in the process, from the beginning, it seemed to me like it really was just about the intent of the recommendation was just about transparency and education. So that's, I guess, really all I have to add. Otherwise, I will defer to Lieutenant Witzenberg.
Yeah.
Lieutenant?
I think that's an easy one. We're working on revising the department webpage. I actually have a sergeant that's going through it over the next couple of weeks to kind of try to incorporate all that stuff.
Very good. And again, we're going to come back once we've figured out everything that's in our final plan. We're going to come back, Chief, and we're going to start to talk about the goals and timelines, and we'll ask that you're obviously a part of that conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. All right. And Scott, and do we still have John? I don't see John now, but Scott, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to bring to the group?
No, I just had a question about the opening when you said you split certain things up to certain people.
Yeah.
Is there a list somewhere where, so like I as a council person trying to follow would know what went where?
Yes. And so Carrie, you'll take care of Scott, right?
I will forward that information to Councilmember Harrington.
Thank you very much. All right, great. All right.
No, I don't
outside
have
of-
any, I don't have anything on this topic, no.
Very good. All right. So council committee discussion then. Any thoughts on this particular recommendation?
I'd just like to echo what Katie said. It's the spirit of it is education, ensuring that folks have a resource to go to that's reliable. There were conversations on the topic of, I'm not sure if this was in the whole committee or the subcommittee, but concerns about where people were getting their information from. So having something from the city as a source, ensuring that we're kind of all on the same page. Just making sure, that maybe off of not to dunk on Wikipedia, but anybody can edit Wikipedia, for example, having a source that's from the city as a reputable kind of go-to for folks.
Okay. Len, Dave, either of you have anything you want to bring to this?
No, I would just agree with everything that's already been said. I think this is a great idea. And as much as we can provide the public would probably be a good thing, and make it as transparent as possible.
Very good.
So I think we tying in with, I haven't heard anything about our website in quite some time, where we are with that, but I'm sure tying it in with the website that's being worked on would be a great idea too. So Carrie may want to work with the lieutenant and make sure they're on the same page of where that is and how the presenting this on the website would work. I think that'd be great.
Just a point of clarification, Chief, is the website, the OPD website that's being worked on, something that is being integrated into the larger city website?
Yeah, I think it's already been pushed over.
Oh, very good. Okay. All right. With that, does somebody want to move that we take this recommendation and include it in our final? Luke?
I'll second.
All right. Second to Dave. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we have two in the final plan. This, for those following along, Scott, if you've got the larger document, the City of Oneonta Police Department Reform and Reinvention Collaborative document. This is in the first section. This is letter E, and just for a point of reference, D had been referred for legal opinion. So we're on to E if you've got this document. Okay. Same for you, John, if you're here. I don't see you. Okay. So with that, I'll read E, which is the board recommends that the Common Council instruct OPD to create a search feature that allows the public to access legally shareable data on OPD's website, including, when applicable, an interpretation of these statistics. This board recommends the incident-based reporting statistics model. OPD should make every attempt to partner with other local law enforcement agencies, in this initiative. And so, Chief, are you laughing at my pronunciations?
It's the incident. So the incident-based reporting system is what we currently use now.
Yes.
And part of the problem that we have is the incident-based reporting system's a mandate through New York State, which apparently doesn't provide any of the information that the CAB was looking for. So we now have to use both IBRS and UCR. So the state required that we used IBRS, which is the incident-based reporting system, but it doesn't provide the information that the CAB was looking for. That's on the old UCRs, which we're no longer allowed to use for state submissions. So it's kind of a catch-22. That's why I was laughing, because it's kind of like when you're doing something right, you're still doing something wrong.
That said, the very fact that you've got to include the UCR, correct? If I was following that.
Yep, that's uniform crime reporting. It's kind of the old system. So it's a matter of us getting it up on the website. We have to figure out how it is that we'll be able to uniformly format that. I think that the current reporting system that we're using will allow us to access that data and even make it so that we can use it in a digital format and upload it right to the site. I just don't know how that's all going to work. I do have some people working on it. We're also working with our support provider for the software that we've got to see if they can write in some programming that would make it easier for us to make a statistical breakdown.
All right. So is your suggestion, Chief, that what we're going to do is we're going to say we recommend that the incident-based reporting statistics model and the UCR, which is uniform
Crime reporting.
Should be included in this search, and that you're as hamstrung as you are by the slow moving or backward moving machinations of the state. Should we not put that in?
I think it's all been done with good intentions.
Yeah.
I think we can work with that. May require some tweaking, but I think we can make it work and put it on the website.
Sure, Len.
What is the legal document data that we're looking for?
Luke?
Things like statistics, in some cases weren't available, given what the commission was looking for. Len, I apologize, off the top of my head, I can't think of the specific statistic, and I don't want to get it wrong, so I don't want to give you an incorrect one. But there were a couple that under the previous system or different systems that other municipalities were using that weren't available through the search features with this particular system that we had difficulty getting information based on.
Chief, can I ask, do these reports drill down to demographics or something, or are they?
They do, but it still needs to be manually entered, and people need to identify themselves. So, even the statistics that we get, if you have people that are not cooperative, that may tend to slant some of the statistical information. I think by and large it would still be valid, but there's a lot of people that don't even want to give us a phone number. So if you start asking them other questions, those are things that, so they still have to be, I mean, some of them we can observe, we can put in, others we've got to ask. So yeah, no, we do take some demographic statistical information.
Yeah, and my guess, Luke, is that's probably where your committee was going with this. But your point is very well taken, Chief. There's a saying in my business regarding computers and scripting and this and that, garbage in and garbage out. So you only have what you have, and you're. But in the meantime, what we're asking for is that the search feature is placed on the website that's going to allow people to at least access the data such as it is. Okay. Any other?
I guess again, I'm sorry, Mark. I'm still just trying to understand what statistical data was in need. I'm drawing a blank of what the recommendation is asking for. I mean.
Well, if I recall correctly, at some points, areas where the specific crime, not the specific crime, but the category of crime might not have been available. In certain cases, race wasn't always available, if I remember correctly. Demographic things to help folks understand what was happening and what folks were being arrested for.
So to cut to the crux of it, though, what the CAB has asked for is that a search feature allows the public to access the information that, Chief, you're already inclined to put on the website, which are the IBRS and the UCR data, and that's basically what we're asking for, correct? There's nothing more to it than that.
No, I think that's doable, but again, I'm at the constraints of what my computer system is going to allow me to do and what the programming is going to allow me to do.
Okay,
know,
so if Luke is pulled over for a DWI and he's charged as such, is that the kind of information that the cab was looking for, that Luke Murphy was?
No, looking for statistics.
So the statistical breakdowns that we're talking about that go into the UCRs essentially just list the number of crimes that fit underneath the categories listed for both IBRS and UCR. How many of those crimes were reported, what the clearance rate was, how many people might have been arrested in that category, and potential demographics of the offenders. So there's no personally identifying information, no social security numbers, names, date of birth, or anything like that that's put in. It's just statistical data. Now, statistical data is great, but it can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. They may not account for some of the nuance within the community. So, I'm sure it's going to, start a whole other conversation where people are going to interpret it the way that they want to, as aside from,
Statistical data is different than legally shareable data.
There is no identifiable person by the individual in any of the UCR IBRS information. So it's
right,
and it's already posted. You can go to the FBI and look at FBI, and you can find the city of Oneonta, and they'll give you all the information from the court here under their ORI number, which is their originating agency number.
Okay.
So again, this has nothing to do with what may come of interpretations, what somebody may do with the information that they've downloaded by way of a search. This is about making that information available, and the chief has stated clearly that that's already the intent. So that being the case, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's just a matter of additional language, including the uniform crimes reports. Along with the incident-based reporting statistics model, and
it's already information we share with both the state and the FBI. So this is just a matter of us finding a way to link it to the website.
Sure. So with that, I want to just let attending council, John, you've just rejoined us, weigh in if there's anything that you would like to add to the discussion before we take it to our committee. Nothing from you, John? Okay. And nothing from you, Scott, or do you have something?
I was just curious, could we put a link to the FBI where it was already set up, and then they could just click on that link, and would that be easier for everybody involved?
I think that might work, but I think it might work.
Might be an addition, Scott? An additional link rather than a link that, is instead of, it's not necessarily a binary choice.
Well, yeah, I was just thinking because we're limited by our equipment, but if it's already in the FBI's database for ORI number, if we could provide the link, they could click on it for all stats, and it goes right to the FBI. This is what it is for the city of Oneonta. Here's all the demographics that they want. That might be easier than trying to rewrite a whole program to get stuff over on the website. It was just an idea. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. That's all.
I want to go to Luke. Thank you, Scott.
I think that's a good point. And what the lieutenant was saying, that there is limitations with the system. What we might be able to do is within the system do as much as we can. And if we can't continue, for example, if there's if the script of the website won't allow it, perhaps providing the link for additional information for folks to get if it's beyond our capability to do.
A lot of this stuff I could be getting to if I was getting struck by lightning weekly.
All right. So what I am suggesting then, is that the board recommends that the common council instruct OPD to create a search feature that allows the public to access legally shareable data on OPD's website, including when applicable, an interpretation of these statistics. This board recommends the incident-based reporting statistics and the uniform crimes reports models. OPD should make every attempt to partner with other local law enforcement agencies in the initiative, including a link to FBI. And I think we could probably put in parentheses following the that second to last sentence, as determined by the capabilities of the system.
If I may, I wasn't able to chime in.
So,
What does it mean to partner with other local law enforcement agencies? Sydney?
it's a good question.
Binghamton?
I think the intention there was, I think, and I could be mistaken, so forgive me if this is the case. I think the idea was having with our campuses in mind, if there's crime occurring in the city or from folks that we might not necessarily get the information from, because UPD is trying to, from what I understand, deal more with the students. If that information is available to share, I think that was the idea. The crime that's happening in the city, ensuring that it's accounted for, I think was the spirit of that recommendation.
So
Should
the
we
university police may not be sharing information,
So there's
they're not contributing.
There's a couple of things here. First, Hartwick has a security office, which means that any arrests that would actually occur through our agency. And then university police is required to submit their own IBRs or UCRs to the state or federal government. So I'm not inclined to try to incorporate any of their data in with ours.
So that is a bit of a wrinkle, Dave and Len and Luke, in terms of that last sentence, as to whether that last sentence continues within the context of this recommendation. Thoughts?
Well, I think if that's the case, would the same website, the FBI website, would it be accessible through there?
They should be. It's been a long time since I've really gone to dabble on those websites. It's been probably 4 or 5 years since I've looked at that stuff. And I think it's just based on what it is that I'm doing at the time. I end up getting busier and busier. So I can take a look and see, but I know for certain that they have their own ORI number, which is a unique distinguishing identifier for university police. It's that we all do. That any entity within the criminal justice system, like the courts, each court, each law enforcement agency has their own identifying originating agency number.
All right, let me run this past everybody one more time. Okay. The board recommends the common council instruct OPD to create a search feature that allows the public to access legally shareable data on OPD's website, including when applicable, an interpretation of these statistics. This board recommends the incident-based reporting statistics and uniform
Crime reporting.
thank you. I can't read my own writing. Crime reporting statistics model. This will be determined by computer capabilities. The implementation of this will be determined by computer capabilities. OPD should also post a link to the relevant FBI data portal, and that might do it.
I think that sounds, from my perspective, it sounds good. It sounds like it encompasses the spirit of the recommendation.
And Dave, you have a thought?
I have nothing to add on that. I would agree with Luke. I think that would be fine.
Len?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that we're not creating more work for office staff. That's probably already overworked, but
Yeah.
it sounds like Scott's idea of the link to a platform that already has the information in a format that's readable to the general public would be the best way to go. And I guess if SUNY, if UPD, SUNY Oneonta UPD wants to share their link, I guess that's something that we could probably put on our webpage.
It's not that hard. I mean, this is last year's, right? And all it does is it just prints out like reported part 1 offenses. And then this is what it looks like.
Okay. So you
Yeah.
can just-
Right. So it's pretty easy for us to run it out. So I don't know if like we're going to copy it into a PDF and like just make a link for the website. I don't think it's going to be that much work once we figure out where to put everything.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the chief's probably right. A lot of this is going to be the setup of the webpage construct, and once that's done, that's done. And they just are, not going to need to bother with it too much more. Would you say that's about right, Chief?
Yeah. And I think it's just a matter of us, staying on top of maintenance of the website, which has been problematic. And, we don't have staff for the website. We have one person running the webpage, and it to some degree puts a burden on us, and I'd like to see us do more of it. And, I'll do what I can, but again, like I said, it's not like we have a full-time IT person. And, a lot of the stuff is just a matter of getting the website designer. And I don't know if Kerry wants to pipe in here.
Carrie would love to pipe in.
Thank you.
Updating the police department website has been a goal. Honestly, it's been a project that's been ongoing for a number of years. And unfortunately, with duties assigned to everybody who is stretched pretty thin right now, it has become a low priority. So being able to get something that is, as the 2 council members stated, a linked PDF document, that is far more ideal. We can also have the ability, as Councilmember Drenick knows, to throw a link on our page, which will make it seem like an extension of our own page, and that will reduce some of the, engineering that we need to do. So we'll get there. It's just unfortunately at the time, it wasn't the priority. It's an ideal time now, though, with the reconstruction of the website. So we'll get there. The sergeant that Acting Chief mentioned has reached out to me actually today. So we'll be setting some time up to go down and review the site and make some on-site changes.
And Kerry, just so you know, I'm actually sending a list of things to him so that we can start kind of touching on them.
Perfect.
And see what the logistical issues are going to be.
Yep. I envision sitting down with him and making the changes as we go, and we can go through each item page by page. It'll take an hour or 2, but it'll be done.
And this goes to our plan of plowing through these and then reconnecting with each one of these recommendations, then in the final plan for timelines for these goals. So in certain cases, just as in this case, there's some time that can be spent in between, really kind of determining what a reasonable timeline might be. So thank you very much, Karen.
No problem.
All right, so did we vote on that? Did we all agree on this? I've spaced on whether or not we actually voted on it.
I don't think we formally voted, but
Okay. All right, so I'd rather not read this again, but I will if you want me to.
I'll read
Okay.
it.
All right, so do we have a motion?
It sounds like the PD is going to work on the link and with Carrie, and so we'll circle back to that in a week or two.
All right, then Len, that's your second, I presume. And all in favor then?
Aye.
aye.
So that's passed. And we move on to, again, Scott and John, for those, for you guys following along. This is in, again, that first section, this is letter F. This board recommends that the Common Council instruct OPD to update and distribute informational materials on a regular basis to ensure accuracy of department policy. Before I go to the chief, I'm just going to ask quickly, Katie, is there anything that you need to bring to this? No. All right, so chief.
I'm not really sure exactly what the recommendation is here, because this is exactly what the accreditation program is for, to get outside entities in to review policy and procedure within the department to make sure that we're up to standard.
Mhm.
So
Chief, I think this was one of the groups had mentioned something about something about print material, and just making sure that the print material was up to date with the names of the folks in charge. I think was the spirit.
Oh, you mean, so back to the website again?
Yeah, yes, but I think also there were handouts in the police department that had been there a while. If I remember correctly, and I apologize, a lot of the meetings are starting to swirl in my head together.
There may have been some reporting information that was out of date in there, but what I'm going to do is work on moving to some sort of online reporting across the board. I think everybody now's got access, and if they don't, the library's got access to the internet.
Yep.
We'll just move everything to online reporting, and it'll go through a series of people, that'll collectively receive complaints, compliments, and tips, all in the same format.
Right. So, Chief, so as I see it, what the CAB has asked for is that OPD is distributing the most up-to-date information materials, and as you're saying, that's something that you're striving to do. It doesn't it doesn't exclude printed materials in favor of web-based. So I would say that the language of this does include printed materials. And so again, it seems to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that you're already, your intention is to do that and to continue to do that. Am I right? Yes. So if that's the case, this seems like something that there's no harm, no foul in this. So I would recommend to this committee, and I'm going to let John and Scott chime in, but for what it's worth, I'm going to recommend to this committee that this is something that we can take as written, because it's not asking the police to do anything that they're not already intending to do. So John or Scott, do you have anything to add before we bring this back to committee discussion? No. All right. So Dave or Luke or Len, you have anything that you would offer relative to modification of this or dumping it, or all good?
I would say in listening to what the police chief wanted to do was move from static material to online to keep it more dynamic.
Yeah, I hear that. I'm very much of two minds about that, Chief. I'm just one voice here, but there is something to be said for somebody picking up printed material, even if it's not high quality print, just something that comes off of a computer. But the idea of having sometimes something that's picked up. What the CAB is asking for is just that's the most updated material.
There were some color printed pamphlets that were placed out in the front of the police department that had not been widely utilized by anybody in the public. So they really collected a lot of dust. We didn't see them return to us in any way. Mm-hmm. And we use paper forms mostly. And those are all updated regularly. So it's just a matter of taking them out of the lobby. And, if somebody requests something, we'll be able to give it to them and it'll be updated.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. All right. So with that, any further discussion among committee members? Do we have a motion to accept this as written?
So moved.
Seconded by Luke. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. So we have 4 in. Okay.
20 to go.
Go ahead. What was that?
20 to go.
Yeah, I know it. All right. H in this very first section. The board recommends that the Common Council instruct OPD to affirm that all officers are required to wear their identity badge, badge, number, name, etc., on their outermost layer of clothing at all times while on duty. So one of the key provisions there being outermost layer, which will change during the season. Chief, again, I'm going to go to you first. And then Katie, if there's anything you need to add to it. But Chief, have you thoughts or concerns? Oh, yes. No,
I mean, given, you know, inclement weather and the fact that the ID that we wear is a pin, and this creates some logistical issues with removal and then putting it on and off. It could be a matter of us going to a different type of uniform, like a name tape, but I find that looks unprofessional. There's a requirement that every officer in this department identify themselves upon request by name, rank, and surname. And we have body camera video and we have GPS data. So I'm not really, I mean, I understand the nature and intent of having the officer's name on their nameplate. And having that, we already have a policy that says they must wear a nameplate in their standard uniform. But, you know, given the, I mean, it could be 20 degrees in the morning and 70 degrees in the afternoon, having them swapping nameplates back and forth or having multiple layers of clothes, it's just going to add to confusion.
What's the, do we have any problem, and Katie, maybe this is a question for you, purchasing more nameplates so that each officer has multiples that they can have on different layers?
That's not really the issue. It's, you know, it's a matter of putting holes in clothing too, because they're pins. It's not, you know, we'd have to go through and potentially buy new jackets because they're poking holes through places that they're not supposed to be poking holes through. You know, might actually have to have name tape stitched onto some sort of a pocket. You know, like it's a inclement weather coat. Putting a nameplate pin through an inclement weather coat is going to damage the coat.
So we already have a department policy that states that the employees are supposed to have their identification, name, identification number, everything on them.
Right.
If requested, they're supposed to show it. If they don't show it because of the body camera, we have proof that
It's a violation. Right. It's a violation of policy.
Before we go into committee discussion, either Scott or John Way want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I would if I got a couple seconds.
You do.
I kind of agree with the chief on this from being out there. When I went and put my raincoat on, and I might have been going in and out of the vehicle several times, you don't have time to sit there to keep putting your name tag on to your raincoat, take it back off, put it back on, put it back off. And the more holes I put in that raincoat, the quicker it's going to rip. Also, if you're working on an accident scene and you got the high visibility vest on,
It's going to cover up.
You're going to cover up the reflective that's supposed to save your life, being out there. And if you're sitting at the side of the road trying to get this pin in on it, you're going to lose your attention. You could get hit by a vehicle. You could cause more of a distraction. So I think on their daily uniform, it's out there. It's where it's be seen. And I know if they're going to wear their vest during the winter, I've never seen one of our officers not have it on the most outer part of their clothes or their jacket. You know, so I understand where they're coming from, but it's not, I don't think it's feasible to have an all-inclusive policy where it says it will be on your outermost thing. And the other thing I'm thinking of too is when you get called in and you're running in to grab something because of a major scene's going on, you might be more in plain clothes than, because you might just go right to the scene and start directing traffic and grabbing a vest out, so you don't have that equipment with you. So, you know, we do call these guys in from on scenes that are really, where they really need them real quick. So, you know, I just don't see where we could actually get a policy that would be an all-inclusive policy that, because it might cause more of an issue than if we just, you know, go like we're going.
John, you have anything that you want to add?
Besides those practical difficulties, there's another level to this, and that is, what is the size? How visible is a number? How visible is a name tag? From what distance? I understand the principle of it to readily identify someone. And it seems to be what they want to do. It's not a matter of knowing the name of your waitress in a restaurant. It's a matter, I think, of being able to say this person was involved in something, and I want to report it, and I want to be able to put a number and a name to that report. Is that, I don't know, is that what was going on with this, Lou?
I have GPS data in all of the cars.
Oh, I have no doubt about it.
So, I mean, it's not hard for me to figure out like the most recent incident, I literally have GPS data that sits alongside the body camera video to show me where the officers were. So, I mean, I appreciate that it's, people want to have the name tags, but again, like you said, we can make them this big or we can make them this big.
That's essentially my point, that
I think that the issue is that they need to be clearly identifiable as police. And in that instance, we have a policy that says your outermost garment will have something to identify you as a police officer, whether it be your badge or actual lettering.
All right, so I'm going to shut down the gallery conversation at this point and move this to committee. So Len, Dave, Luke, you have thoughts? The chief's last modification recommendation was that maybe it's not necessarily an identifier of the officer uniquely, but rather of the fact that the officer is a member of the OPD on their outermost clothing, whatever that clothing. Am I right in paraphrasing what you said, Chief, is that their outermost clothing will identify them as OPD?
As a police officer, yes, if they're at a scene.
So that said, I personally would only add, I would say that the outermost clothing should be, and Chief, again, this is just reiterating policy, but the outermost clothing will identify them as a police officer, understanding all of the other issues around changing out badges, timeframes, and all the points that Scott made. That's my recommendation. Luke, Dave, Len, thoughts? Luke?
Yeah, so the spirit of this goes down to making sure that, if someone's, this is rare, granted, if someone's mistreated, they're able to report it. I think our department's probably small enough that as long as they could distinguish some, so for example, if they, forgive my ignorance, Lieutenant, is it pretty easy to tell the difference between a UPD officer and an OPD officer based on the uniform?
Yeah, they look like kind of a state trooper with a gray uniform on. They wear Stetson hats.
Okay.
So we all wear either no cap or 8-point, and we have dark blue uniforms. So as far as that goes, we are us and Cooperstown Police Department wear similar uniforms, and based on the fact we're so far separated, I think there's going to be too many, not too much confusion there.
Okay.
I'd like to rewrite this and see if this is something we might be able to accept as a committee, and that is that the board recommends that the Common Council instruct OPD to affirm that all officers are required to wear an identifier as a member of the Oneonta Police on their outermost layer of clothing at all times of the day.
Sounds good.
That works for you, Len. Okay. Dave, you have any thoughts?
You're muted, Dave.
Sorry. The only thing I'm a little confused on, and maybe I was misunderstood about the pin. When I was talking about purchasing additional pins or whatever name identifier for the outermost layer, so if it's the dead of winter or it's pouring rain, whatever the outermost layer is going to change to, I wasn't talking about having a pin that is moved to that layer and then moved elsewhere. I'm talking about having a standard quality identifier like you have on your uniform, on your badge, that would stay on that outermost layer. It would be a matter of us budgeting it in, and it would. I'm not under any illusion that this is going to be cheap, but something that's permanent, that looks nice, that's quality, and that the OPD can be proud of. But then it gives that relief to the people that are concerned about this, but it also looks good.
So I know you're a big backpacker, right? A lot of the jackets, there's some of the spring weight coats that we have and whatnot are Gore-Tex, and we're poking holes through because they don't put name tag.
No, I understand that. It may even have to be not a pin. It may have to be something that we actually purchase and have done embroidered on, or whatever would work.
They also do have very strong magnetic pins. That are on plates. They've got very, very strong magnets.
I don't know that I would
try those.
That,
I can tell you that this pin here, this name pin here, I've had for 20 years. And I got yelled at because it was in terrible shape about 10 years ago. And I've gone through 6 of the other ones because they're terribly made. I don't know if we can try. I mean, we can try. That's something that we can work on, work towards. I think that, given the fact that I'm looking at, I have 4 separate coats in my locker, and 2 safety vests. That just grabbing the wrong coat, it's more of a nuisance than it is anything else. It's just difficult for us. I mean, the badge is one thing, and most people will recognize it, especially walking down the hallway in the station and say, hey, you need your badge on your, and even then, if you're like, forget it, you could take the one off your shirt and put it right on your jacket because there's a space for it, right? These, if you lose the back of a pin, it falls down into your shirt and then your pin falls. It's just, wearing jewelry on your uniform, like on your clothing, it's different, and that's really what we're looking at, is we're looking at pinning some sort of jewelry, or, if we stitch it in, or we change the uniform, that's fine. We just got like $500 coats a couple of years ago because of the city manager.
Right.
Those have some nameplate stuff, and I think a lot of the guys are wearing nameplates on them.
Maybe what we could look to do is, as a council, whenever there's a change in uniform, if there's when we've got budget in new uniforms for the officers, we can put something in the policy that we look to see if there's anything new out there that will help provide an identifier then for the officers for the outer layers. I mean, am I making sense here?
Yeah, I think so.
That sounds good.
Move
to so how often would that
possible?
Dave, how often would council be looking at trying to determine new apparatus?
This is a whole different conversation. We're getting into the police uniform is a very tricky thing. There's a lot of study and discipline that's gone into actually choosing police uniforms, which ones are the most easily identifiable, which ones are the most trusted. There's lots of articles. You can go ahead and look them up. That becomes real dodgy. I can look into getting additional nameplates for outer garments. That's not a huge issue. My concern is that the jackets get tossed in the back seat because you're going from a hot car into the cold. It's really just not very practical. And, it's not like I'm trying to say that I don't want to identify my officers. It's that we kind of have a lot to think about. And when we're thinking about, oh my goodness, do I have everything that I need? Now you're changing over a badge and like you're carrying all of your gear. Like this stuff I have to actually take on and off. And the same thing with these, every time I change my shirt. So if I do that every time I change my shirt, I have to do it every time I change my jacket. I've got 3 different jackets.
I would only want to do this if it's something that's not it's not taking any thought to do, because I agree, you guys have more on your plate. The last thing you want to do is worry about moving a nameplate around when you're out on the job.
I will
I mean,
look at what coats we have here and whether or not we can put nameplates on them. And we will work towards putting more nameplates out. I don't know if I can do that with all of the coats that we have, but I will do my best to get additional nameplates to put on outside of the officers' uniforms.
So let me suggest this. It seems to me that this is also wind up something that could be researched by purchasing. I may be wrong, but I don't think I am. And so if we simply said, as I said earlier, that we Common Council instructs OPD to affirm that all officers are required to wear an identifier as they're being a member of the Oneonta Police Department on their outermost layer of clothing at all times while on duty, and that OPD and or purchasing researches options for additional nameplates, and we'll see what might be available, if anything, with the caveat being that if it's not something that's going to last, if it's something that's going to come apart and fall between your clothing and come off and be laying on the sidewalk or wherever it may be, that it's not pursuable. But in the meantime, that the intent of Luke's group was that the police would be identified, and we can at least make some effort by way of research to see what new things may be either currently available or on the horizon, while at the same time not asking your folks to do anything more than they're doing, Chief, which is to always present themselves as police officers. All right, committee, that's kind of a wordy rewriting of that. But yeah, you're laughing, Len.
It was a little wordy. It was a little wordy, but you're doing it on the fly, Mark.
It was. I'm willing to have anybody who wants to take a crack at tearing that down, but for all intents and what we will do is I'll wordsmith this and get it to all of the committee members so that it jives with what we've agreed to here. But not having Dave Mertzik here to be the wordsmith. But in any case, do we have any additional discussion on this, or do you think we can move forward with it?
Well, Mark, do you want to wordsmith it and then bring it back to the next meeting?
Right.
Sure. Yes, I will.
Thanks,
Absolutely. All right.
Mark,
All right.
Mark, I just, as I'm looking at this, there are a number of, well, the word instruct is an imperative. We're ordering the police department to do something. And this sounds a little equivocating. So you might want to look at what you're saying in how we're adopting this recommendation. What are we instructing someone to do? And if it's like, look into something, we could do that. And also the other members of the council, or we're not, two of us are not voting on any of these things, but
Right.
4 others will be. So
Right.
be cautious about the not just going an easier route. Four more people are going to have to vote on this.
Absolutely, John. Point well taken. But in the meantime, I will give it my best effort and bring it back to committee at our next meeting.
So Mark, the essence is that OPD identifies themselves as an officer, a police officer.
Correct.
And when possible, to have a nameplate or identifier on their outermost layer. That's the essence of what we're trying to do here.
I think that, and what I had added to that was that we would ask purchasing to keep abreast of. Are you shaking your head at me, Chief?
I just want to say, like, we know what equipment's out there. I mean,
Okay.
we buy this stuff right here. It's purchasing doesn't handle our purchasing of nameplates. If we make this a suggestion that says that we will do, our best to ensure that we have some sort of identifying surname on the outside of the uniform. I just don't want to put it into, like, this is going to turn into, oh, you're not wearing your nameplate. I got you. And it's going to turn into something else that people are just going to complain about. If we turn it into a suggestion, I'll strongly encourage my officers to do this. We can work on getting additional nameplates. They're not that much money. I'm sure we can manage to start putting them into the inventory. Some people may already have more than one. So, it's going to be just a matter of encouraging people to put them on their uniforms and the coats that are appropriately designed to accommodate them. And then if we buy new coats, we can start working on coats that have a place for nameplates specifically. Again, we just got brand new coats, so I'm not anticipating this happening for a while.
So Chief, so what we are saying then is that we're going to, the board will recommend that OPD, that the council instructs OPD to affirm that all officers are required to wear an identifier that they are in fact only onto police officers on their outermost layer. That's not an issue. And that that OPD will endeavor to place pins on badges, pins on their identifying pins on their outermost layer as is possible, depending on the type of clothing, and you'll make that effort.
I certainly will.
So Len, Dave, and Luke, we're saying that we are instructing OPD to identify themselves as police officers at all times through their outermost layer, but we ask them, so there's a difference, we ask them to be making the effort to wear identifying badges when possible on top of that outer layer, along with the identifier of the fact that they're police officers.
We just use the word request instead of required.
That's basically, yes. Basically, yes. And if we can agree on that, I can save myself having to bring this back to you guys and we can put another check on the sheet here. Dave, Luke, you have thoughts before we go further? All right. Is this something that somebody would make a motion to accept then?
I'll make a motion to accept.
All right. Is there a second? All right, second. And no further discussion on that, I presume, looking at your face there, Luke? Okay. All in favor then?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So that was tougher than I thought it was going to be. All right. So we move on to letter L at the bottom of my sheet, probably yours as well. Goes to council, so forget that. Moving on to the second phase, and we are an hour and 15 minutes into this, and we aren't going to get all of these done today. Can we agree that we might put another half an hour into this?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Sure.
Yep.
Will that, no conflicts, Carrie, as far as you can see? And
No
and
conflicts.
Katie
The
and
next
Chief,
meeting
you're
is
good?
7 o'clock.
Okay. We
I
won't go
was-
that far.
I was going to honestly recommend 32 minutes, but if you guys want to cut it at a half hour, that works.
You're welcome. All right. All right. So moving
Nice one,
on
Luke.
to section 2, and it's letter C. All right. This and section 2, just as a frame of reference, is use of force, officer conduct, additional trainings, personnel, and recruitment. All right. So, section 2, letter C, this board recommends that the Common Council instruct OPD to create a policy that, if it has not done so, or to update current policy to incorporate a focus on broader social training, including and addressing topics related to abuse, sensitivity, community relations, mental health, diversity, and unconscious bias. This policy should include the consideration of utilizing different and updated modals of training that place a greater emphasis on community relations. I'm going to ask Katie if this is something that you need to weigh in on before we move on to anybody else.
I think in general, this was good feedback to hear from the community that this is kind of, a focus area. I think it's something, obviously not for the purposes of what we're discussing tonight, but some of these things are certainly items that we could and should be incorporating into the city's training program on a larger scale. But that said, I'm not clear on whether or not OPD has a policy which delineates specific training. So on this one, again, I will defer to Lieutenant.
Okay, Lieutenant, you're up.
I would have to go back and look specifically for a policy to address this, but this is something that we all are already doing. We've had officers trained in trauma-based interviewing for sex offense victims. We've worked with opportunities for Otsego and putting together a lot of that stuff. I'm currently working with Sue Matt regarding some crisis intervention training. I just sent somebody off for procedural justice training about 3 weeks ago. So this is something that's on the forefront, and I would have no problem incorporating this into either a policy statement or operating procedure that lists this as areas of concern for public interest, and that we will continue to pursue these trainings as they become available.
I like the way that sounded. So I'm going to ask John and Scott, as the council members who are in attendance that are not part of the committee, if they have any thoughts that they'd like to register before we move on to committee.
No,
Scott?
this is every job I've ever had in my life. This is training that I've gone through. So I think it's pretty much out there for most businesses. So.
Okay. John, have you any thoughts?
No, this is, it's essentially keeping up with training requirements and outlining what those training requirements are. I'd ask the chief, does the state require certain trainings and leave others as optional? Unless the chief isn't here.
I think the chief has maybe stepped away, but I guess what I can add, not necessarily from the police perspective, but there are certain trainings that are mandated for all employees every year. And those are things like workplace violence prevention, sexual harassment, drug and alcohol stuff, things like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Katie. And Chief, I'm going to now take this to the committee, and we'll have what discussion needs to happen. Go ahead, Lynn.
I'd like to make a motion. We accept the recommendation as is.
Okay, second by Luke. All right, any discussion at all? All right, in that case, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all right, very good, appreciate that. Recognizing this is D, again, for those following along, recognizing the nuances of town-gown relationships, this board recommends that the Common Council work with OPD and SUNY Oneonta to continue the exploration of options in partnering to allow for growth and relief of the services our department is providing, as well as allowing UPD to assist professionally with their population, and the community will benefit from a police department with fewer stresses and greater availability. So this is about the partnership with UPD, and Lieutenant, this is something that I think you're actually kind of proud of, the progress that has been made in these last several months. I'm going to let you speak to this before we entertain other people's comments.
We proudly work with all of our partners in law enforcement and security in the community, whether it be Bassett Security, Hartwick Security, or University Police Department. They all bring us a gateway to those individual organizations and provide us with an ability to navigate the institutions, which sometimes have considerable red tape. We are working currently on an investigation with and in conjunction with University Police Department. So this is something that we've greatly expanded upon over the last couple of years. I'm super proud of some of the work that we've done with them this year regarding the COVID response and managing, large groups so that we don't have big super spreader events. They've been really responsive to us, and we've had a good year thus far. And I think that Chief Fila and I are looking forward to being able to kind of go back and review, take a closer look at our successes in this area. So this is something that we fully intend on continuing to do.
That's terrific. Katie, have you anything that you want to add to this at all? No. Very good. Scott, John? No, and no. Very good. All right. In that case, we're at committee level with this. And first, let me ask if there's a motion to accept this as written. Yes, no, yes, Luke. Is there a second?
Well, I have questions here.
Go ahead.
But we can do that if we want to have a motion in the
Yeah,
second.
and we'll go to discussion. Yes.
Sure.
All right. So second on that.
I'll second.
All right. And so let's go to discussion.
Maybe I read this wrong, but I was looking at the key part of this paragraph that jumped out at me was as well as allowing UPD to assist professionally with their population. Chief, did you read this as the request was requesting UPD be allowed to operate as within the city as an extension of their jurisdiction?
Well, I mean, there's some,
I mean, I would love that, but I don't think they can. I think there's limits.
well, to some, I mean, we have a memorandum of understanding with them, and they, if they are requested by the on-duty supervisor, they are able to come down and assist us, you know, at the level that they're directed by a fellow law enforcement officer, right? So, yeah, there's all sorts of ways that works. People can be arrested at the direction of a police officer. So you're acting now under my authority as a civilian, but they actually are police officers, which means that they have arrest powers for crimes that occur in their presence. And they also have the ability to back us up on certain things and ride along with us like anybody else does. The difference there is they do carry some authority. So while they're not writing tickets per se within the confines of the city, they could potentially write out, let's say, an appearance ticket and put our name on it so that they can assist us in other ways. And the ways that they're assisting us now is they're helping us compile student data so that we're able to bring that stuff back up to the college so that the administration of the college can hold students accountable for off-duty conduct. And the investigation that we're working with them now, they're able to assist us in identifying some students so that we can bring them in for interview and that kind of thing. So I didn't read it that they were going to come in and we were going to say, hey, we're having a speeding problem on West Street. Can you write tickets there for us? I did not read it that way. I read it in that if we call them for assistance with student-related off-campus issues specifically, that they can come and assist us and do what they do best, and that is deal with the students.
Okay.
Luke?
Just to back up what Chief said, yeah, I think that was the spirit of it. And I apologize if there was confusion there. It's trying to synthesize thoughts. But yes, I think that was the spirit of it.
Len? I saw your hand up there for a minute.
I don't believe I had it up.
Okay. All right. In that case, now that that has been explained and clearly the lieutenant is happy to have the assistance of UPD within the construct that we've just heard discussed. We've had the motion and it's been seconded. Is there any further discussion on this, Dave? No. Okay. Then all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Alrighty. This I have this as being something that everyone here and then probably back to council. But this is E. Council's going to obviously be weighing in on things across the board on this, but most specifically for John and Scott's information. This board recommends the Common Council explore the feasibility of investing in a position for an individual to handle public relations or the creation of a public information officer position dedicated to increasing transparency between OPD and the community. And go ahead, Chief.
I just sent an officer away to Public Information Officer School March 18th to 19th. As far as having a full-time person assigned to this, I think given our staffing condition right now, I don't think that is super feasible, but we are working on getting somebody that will be more inclined to getting information out more quickly and maybe exploring some new ways of being able to do that.
So what we're saying then, Chief, is that investing in a position for an individual to handle public relations essentially is currently the strategy.
Public information officer per se is not a position that I could dedicate a person to.
Right.
But it is something that I can train individual officers to work together on. So that's the goal for me, is to get some individual officers trained as public information officers to explore how we might be able to utilize them to increase transparency and communication with the community.
So go ahead, Dave.
Chief, is this, and I apologize, I keep going back and forth between calling you lieutenant and chief. But is this something that somebody in your position, either lieutenant or chief or acting chief, is this something that you would typically have training in as well? Because that's the first thing I thought is.
Yes and no. You know, there's a lot of things there's a lot of nuance when it comes to public information. So I'll just put it this way. Sometimes at a critical incident, it's best to have somebody that's not at the executive level making statements. It's kind of like not having the President of the United States speaking at every media conference.
Right.
You need to have a face in front, because sometimes the decisions that have to be made need to be made without interruption, and they'll get an update. And then those updates come through a single face within the department and not necessarily the head of the department, unless there's a press conference in which there's a planned appearance of the department head. Most times it's recommended to have somebody that's just a public information officer and is able to get that information out at the request of the chief or commanding officer. Does that make sense?
Len.
I think so.
I'd like to take a stab at rewording this, that we take this recommendation and craft it to the common council will invest in the OPD training of individual or individuals a PIO on a part-time basis. I agree with the chief. We're just not a large enough department to fund a dedicated individual for just PIO. It's just.
I've got another take on that, Len. I just want to put out there, if I could, which is that the board recommends that the Common Council direct OPD to assign and train an individual to handle public relations in order to dedicate an increase in transparency between OPD and the community. Because it sounds like what the chief is doing now without the actual creation of a part-time position. Am I right?
I'm certainly training people, you know, in community relations, and part of that is public information officer training. You know, the other part of that is going to be, you know, selecting people that are comfortable speaking in front of other groups to go to community, whatever community functions they happen to be invited to or directed to go to be in attendance. But yeah, I mean, every member of this department should be a community-minded police officer and work in the with the idea of we're increasing relations with every person we speak to. So that's the goal, right? Is to make sure that everybody understands that it's a institutional expectation that we're putting our best foot forward in public and we're talking to people, that kind of thing. So there will be some people specifically trained in public information, and there'll be some people specifically trained in some public relations. But I think that something.
And they would be identified, Chief? I mean, we would know. who would be-
Well, I mean, you know what, like, I don't know how I do that. I mean, it could be like one guy's off and I need a public information officer. So, you know, where do I go with that? We're just too small an agency to say, we're gonna have a public information, or like, that's like for a department that has a media department, right? They've got their public relations / media department, right? I mean, New York City Police Department's got a movie crew, you know. I don't have a movie crew.
Sure.
We will work on that for you.
Thanks.
I was going to say
So
the next
let me-
cab we're going to move.
Len, I want to go back to your rewrite of this, because you were saying essentially the creation of a part-time PO.
To train
So
existing police officers
specific
in
individuals.
PIO.
Yeah.
I've actually got something written here that might work. It's
Go ahead, Dave.
basically taking what Mark said, what Chief said, and what Len said. So this board recommends the Common Council will invest in, or will encourage the OPD to invest in training of individuals to handle public relations to increase transparency between OPD and the community.
I like that. Luke, this is your baby. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that sounds about right. One of the disclaimers that was put at the head of the document was, you know, we're not a lot of the sorry, I'm tripping over myself here.
Going around.
A lot of folks are not familiar with the intricacies of the city budget, what staffing is available, what isn't available, and that the spirit of this is maintained. And I think the spirit of this is maintained. We are a smaller department. And I think hiring, or rather training an individual or individuals that can fill this role within the department without necessarily going and adding an additional full-time, especially considering the difficulty of staffing at the moment, I think that would be a perfectly rational compromise.
Okay.
Mark, I think we heard the chief say that he's training individuals to do public relations and he's training individuals to be a PIO.
Right.
I wouldn't want to miss out on the opportunity to have trained individuals at both those levels.
Yep. Exactly, and especially given the fact that OPD is doing this now, right, Chief? You're doing it now. Does that change what Dave has put together? Pretty much hits all the markers for what we are asking OPD, and it seems to me that Lieutenant, you're actually going above and beyond a little bit, which is kind of a great thing, right? But in terms of this document, what Dave has put together I believe hits the marker here. Len, would you agree?
Dave, did I miss it? Did you have PIO in there? I only heard public relations. I didn't hear you say PIO.
No, I didn't say PIO. We can add that.
Yeah, we can add it, but my point is that, we can say public relations because that literally is what's being asked for within this document, in this recommendation. And the fact that the chief is doing more than that OPD is doing more than that, is kind of a great thing.
Is this something that we could just slide into the training portion for sake of simplicity, and slide this back to like the sensitivity and like cultural training, public information? Because to me, it's all training stuff, and it's all going to fall into the same lines. And I just don't want it to get like mixed up in the document. Oh, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it.
I think I kind of
I don't
want
want to confuse anything. That's fine.
Hang on a second. John.
Just
Just
is the
quickly.
way I understand this. A public information officer is a role is often assigned when there's a critical event that needs to be explained or to the press, to the community, whatever. And a public in a large department with a lot of incidents, number of people are trained to do that, sometimes appointed to stand up in a particular area, a precinct area, to do a particular explanation to the press, etc. On the other hand, increasing transparency and being dedicated to that often can involve other things that I know that could be done, which would be speaking at schools, speaking at Rotary, doing other sorts of things that could be reported on. But there are things that can occur that are somewhere between being humane and communicative in an individual or a small group encounter, and then having some sort of a program. I knew the fire department was doing it and going out and talking at schools or doing different sorts of things to educate people about how quickly a fire can burn and the role of the fire department, and having a bit of an educational piece that leans over to that. And I don't know whether we want to hold the police accountable for something like that, or it's a good program to do that. There used to be a school officer.
We
And
have a presence in all of the schools. We
yeah,
have,
Steve, my next door neighbor, Steve, was frequently in that role. But that was just an opportunity to have a police presence with a large number of young people who you want to be comfortable with the police and how they're handling things. But it's just a matter of some sort of communication program that becomes a kind of, what have you done lately to keep the public informed in an educational manner.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, John. I want to go back to Dave, and you've rewritten this to include that last little bit. Did you wind up tucking that in, Dave? You're muted.
I didn't add in anything because I didn't know where we were going with it yet.
Okay.
And I have a question of Chris about whether that is something that the police are in fact doing or could be doing.
yeah, we've gone to talk to churches, church groups. We've spoken with, we do annual bank trainings for the banks on security. We'll do security assessments for people that ask us to do them. We just did today, as a matter of fact, Good Neighbor Talks at multiple fraternity houses. So we were able to get into and talk with the memberships there, with the fire department and code enforcement. So we're incorporating our things with other departments within the city, so we can get our word out there as far as how to be a good neighbor. We do a lot of stuff with the schools, including like rapid. I don't want to get into too many like strong words, but any time that they do like lockdown drills, we'll go through and walk through with the principal, and we'll occasionally talk to the students about, we have a juvenile detective that does educational stuff in the schools, and she's there frequently. We do school crossings. And the kids get to see us out on the corner, and we hand out pencils. There's a lot of stuff that we do.
Yeah, I'm going to, I appreciate it. We all do, honestly. But what I want to do is I want to come right back to this to see if we can get this wrapped up, because I think we're awfully close. And John, I appreciate your input, but at this point, I want to keep this now within committee. And if we could, please, we're looking at a rewrite. I want to go back to what Dave had put together. We had looked at adding the additional verbiage, which I think covers what the lieutenant is doing. And to John's point, there's a lot more being done. To the chief's point, there's a lot more being done. But in terms of the spirit of this particular recommendation, we want to see if we can just, rather than expanding this, see if we can just hit it with what can be done. So, Dave, with that, could you?
You want me to reread what I had down?
Would you mind? It's been a bit.
This board recommends the Common Council will encourage OPD to invest in training individuals to handle public relations to increase transparency between OPD and the community. If we, just let me know if you want to put in a PIO in there somehow, just tell me where to handle public relations, or do you want to,
Chief, so let me stop you for a quick second there. Chief, what's your recommendation? I think we'd all like to hear where, how you might want to modify that language relative to what you're currently doing.
I think I'm prioritizing this as a, public relations, public information officer. I don't want to say that I'm going to have one. I want to say that I've got 27.
right?
I kind of, this department's very small in some regards. It's big enough so that we have some real strengths. However, our strengths are in being generalists and not in specialists. So I want to try to get as many people trained in this as I possibly can. And therefore, it kind of trickles amongst the ranks as to what it is that can and can't be done. So it's a matter of institution, really. We will continue to focus on public relations and public information. As far as actually having a specific one, no, but we can continue to train for public relations and public information.
So Chief and Dave, so what I'm hearing is that the OPD will assign and train individuals, plural, to handle public relations and public information officer duties as a department.
So we can add in to training of individuals to handle public relations and public information to increase transparency between OPD and the community.
That sounds really familiar, like about 10 minutes ago.
Just for you, just for
Guys are
you,
giving me a headache.
All right, I move that forward. Do we have a second?
Yeah, we got seconds and thirds on this. So with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Dave, when you have an opportunity, just send me that rewrite, okay, please? All right. All right, can we take one more before we call it done for today?
That one, the next one is big. It's a lot of.
Oh, yeah, well, we won't do it. We will, no, the next one is actually going to, that's going to legal. F.
Oh, it is. You're right.
So let's do G, and we'll call that a day when we roll through G. Okay. All right. So again, this is G. This board recommends that the council work with OPD in examining and further defining the purpose and priorities of OPD's strategic response team. I'm gonna, Katie, is there anything that you would bring to this before I ask the lieutenant? Okay. Have we wasted your time here, Katie? Not too much.
No,
Okay.
I am always happy to be present.
Good. Well, we're really glad
Safe
to have.
here.
We're very glad to have you here, and there'll be more for you next time. I guarantee you.
Okay.
So with that, Lieutenant, if we can ask you to weigh in.
The Special Response Team is a team of officers that receive ongoing training in multiple doctrines. Again, this goes back to us being generalists and not specialists, up to and including crisis negotiation, mental health response, peer-to-peer intervention, response to active violence, CPR, critical life-saving trauma care, defensive tactics, structure clearing, and many other topics that are immediately transferable back to the members of patrol through training and mentorship. Well-trained officers of this caliber use force more sparingly and understand the most successful resolutions are met with no force at all. So, this is...
Sounds well-defined already.
I think so.
It does. I'm going to give both Scott and John a couple of minutes apiece if you've got anything you want to add to this. Scott, yes? No.
I guess I really don't. I'm assuming that
Okay.
we kind of already do this anyway with a council. If we ask the
That's fine.
chief, they pretty much tell us everything. So
That's fine. All right. And John, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Agreed. Yes,
Okay.
I'm
Or-
comfortable with this and Chris's reading.
All right. So now I'm going to take this to committee then. Let's just go right into discussion. We'll probably be able to hopefully take care of this. But does anybody have a thought? Dave, Luke, Len?
Well, maybe just the definition that Chief Witzenberg just read needs to be, I guess, on a public format. Maybe that wasn't provided to the CAB at a public level, and that's what led to this recommendation. But it just sounded well defined and what the responsibilities, what the expectations were, and I don't know how much more you could add to that.
I personally, I would concur that it does sound like this is something that has been well thought out, but not necessarily well publicized. And maybe that's a case of finding a home for it, Chief, in the restructured website where it is available to people and on first view of the site. They don't have to go looking for it. Dave, you have any thoughts?
At this point, I have nothing to add on this.
Okay. Luke, how about yourself?
I don't think so. In the context of this conversation, I don't believe so. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, as this is worded, it's saying that the council should work with OPD. And so it's not saying that OPD should do something. It's that the council should work with OPD to then examine and further define, et cetera, et cetera. So let me kind of take it back to what the recommendation is. Is this something, Len, Dave, Luke, that we feel that we should recommend the council should invest time in sitting down with OPD to review what we've heard the lieutenant provide us, or do we feel like that's a moot exercise?
Yes, for me, in listening to what Chief Witzenberg just gave as a definition of what that response team is responsible for, what their expectations for not only them, but of the public, I don't know what else we would add to that discussion. It sounds like they've had it well thought out. It's been in existence for, I don't know how many decades. I've lost track.
31 years.
There you go. But I'm gonna, I guess, assume that the reason why this recommendation is here is because it wasn't publicly addressable, meaning whoever was looking for it wasn't able to find the definition of what the expectations were. So
Is that why this is here, Luke?
Well, I think, yes, that's partially the case, but just a better understanding of and I guess I would advocate bringing it to council just out of respect for the folks that were requested more discussion on it. Talking about kind of the role it plays in policing, and Chief, if you don't mind speaking at council as towards its necessity or its mission, I think I don't see harm in doing that.
I think there may be an understanding that this is a SWAT team that's just a SWAT team. This is a group of people that are police officers every day, that respond to calls every day, and that the training that they get on the special response team is specifically tailored to make them better to be able to respond to their everyday duties. Their everyday duties are to be your neighborhood police officer, right? And if we have an extraordinary situation, we want people that are able to communicate and operate as a team better than most other police agencies. And that's the goal, is to make sure that we've got a structured team that's able to function at a much higher level of performance because they train together on a regular basis.
So Luke, how do you feel about that?
I think that's a good explanation, and I think it would be beneficial for the public to hear that. So I still stand by bringing this to council.
All right, so then Luke's looking at having this recommendation stand as is. Am I right, Luke, that this is something that essentially is recommending that we take it to council? I would recommend, sorry, Luke, but I would recommend a different recommendation that reads something along the lines of that the board recommends that the OPD make the definition, purpose, and priorities of its strategic response team more readily accessible to the public via their website.
I think so, but I mean, there was concern over the perception of it being a SWAT team, a standing SWAT team, and I think if the public can hear its actual purpose, I think that would clarify things. Because
John, we're gonna keep this within the committee at this point. I'm sorry, Dave.
So
Were you asking me to comment?
Yes, yes. I thought you were looking to comment.
Well, I sort of was formulating something. I think that I would agree with Luke that the public has a different perception of this. I think the perception is 99% of the issue. I would be okay with rewriting this and saying that providing more information about it on the website so people can see what it, see a definition of what it really is and what, how that, how that's part of OPD and who they are and what they do. I think that would hopefully alleviate some of the misconceptions of what it is.
Glenn?
If you go out, or do you have officers go out and talk about this in the public, the strategic response team? Do you give
occasionally we might have some people bring out some gear and talk about, use that stuff as like show and tell for job fairs, recruitment.
Okay.
You know, we've had members go out so people can be familiar with some of the things that we're able to do. You know, we don't typically have.
Do you talk about it when you said earlier you go out to churches and other not-for-profit organizations? Do you bring up the strategic response team? That's what I'm getting at.
Special response team, yes. And the special response team has actually been invited to multiple churches for access to the building to do training. You know, we use the schools occasionally so that we've got a really good functional idea of the layout of the schools. You know, we use public buildings occasionally, like City Hall and the Armory, to be able to do that. And, you know, the team is really very familiar with a lot of the larger buildings, including the hospitals, where we've worked with security on getting access to the hospital areas that, you know, some people don't. So they've got an idea of the layout of the hospitals.
So doctors and nurses and janitorial staff are seeing you within the facilities, within the complex. I guess I'm trying to,
Staffing is a bit of an issue, obviously. So there's been less this year than there has been in years past. But yeah, that's definitely a function that we try to lean on, and that is getting out in public so people get to meet the officers on the team and get to know them better.
right. I hear you, Luke, and I'm just wondering what's the best end game here? So getting Chief Witzenberg to come before the county council, unfortunately it's going to be in a Zoom format. How will that help get the marketing so that the general public knows more about the special response team? It seems like if they did more marketing at their level out on the not-for-profit organizations and or just the general public, that information would get out to the public quicker, more intimate than a one-time deal in front of the common council.
Well, sure. No, I agree. I think it would be great if community organizations would do that, but we don't have any control over what community organizations say and do. You know, if you look at the views that we get on a YouTube video for a common council, we occasionally get 1,200, 1,300 people watching. And that's a big chunk of the city. The folks that I worked with that had concerns over the role of SRT in the community, I think it would mean a lot to them to hear the exact role of it. Because we're going to council with several other of these recommendations. I believe we had a section, Mark, last time, didn't we, to discuss as a larger council? I could be mistaken.
No, we had a third group where those items are going to go to council.
I think it would do a lot to inform the public. I just don't see a downside to it. I also, you know, I think it gives the department a chance to kind of define what this is and clears up some of the misunderstandings about it. I do take your point. I think it would be great if more local organizations invested the time into exploring these options. But you know, while we're discussing this, I think it's a timely time to do it. And since we can't necessarily, you know, tell Presbyterian Church to do a seminar on SRT, it might not be a bad idea to have the chief briefly discuss its role, similar to what he did with us, to clear up the misconceptions.
So, Luke, your motion, I presume that you're going to make, is that we adopt the language that is currently the recommendation, and that this is something that the lieutenant has an opportunity within the context of any number of other things that chief will be at council for relative to the rest of this document, that he has an opportunity to state for the public record on YouTube, where we see 1,200, 1,300 views, this is what we're doing. And in doing that, maybe, you know, have a few people feel a little bit better about the plans and the process that the OPD employs. So that's do you want to make a motion to adopt the recommendation as is?
I do.
All right, then I would second it. There's also, I had begun to put together a recommendation for motion, but I think I'm going to rescind that, especially given the context of the fact that the chief will be, you know, there in council for other things, so that my concern of the circus aspect of just this one element all by its lonesome, I don't think that that's really a legitimate concern, given the fact that the chief will be there for other things. This is more, in fact, I think a place where OPD can state something for the public record that's going to actually make people feel better about the planning, the processes that are in place. So I support this recommendation. I second the recommendation, and I rescind what I was looking to put together. As any discussion on this? Go ahead, Len.
So, point of clarification, it's not OPD's strategic response team. So if you're going to move this recommendation forward, let's get it at least.
Yes, that's right. We should modify the verbiage. Exactly right. So it's the special response team as opposed to strategic.
That's correct.
And my apologies, Chief, for putting that down wrong.
Oh, no, my feelings aren't hurt. I promise.
All right. The Robert's rules sometimes are more than my brain can truly process. So Dave, Len, I'm going to ask you to help me out here. Should we be introducing any other resolutions here, recommendations here, or should we be voting on this motion that's been put forward?
There could be an addendum added to it at this point, but I have nothing further to add.
Okay, Dave. No, you're muted.
Sorry.
That's right.
Are you suggesting that we need to add an official addendum to change it from strategic to special? Because I would say we could just do a friendly amendment to that.
Excuse me.
That certainly sounds right to me. So
No,
with,
Dave, friendly amendment is fine. That's what I had already done.
all right, so with that very friendly amendment having been made, do we need to vote on that amendment? I suppose we do. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And then now the motion as it stands is that we are, I'm just going to read it. This board recommends that the council work with OPD in examining and further defining the purpose and priorities of OPD's special response team, period. And that, as we understand it, that working with OPD essentially amounts to inviting OPD to council to present what it is that they are doing. And if the council has any additional thoughts, they'll make them at that time.
That sounds, if you're looking for a motion, Mark, then I motion to do that. If not, then I think that sounds good.
No, so we've got Luke's motion, second on that. Do we have?
Thought we had a motion to accept.
Yeah, I guess we do with the friendly.
Yeah, we
motion.
already had a
Agreed
motion.
on that.
Second.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, Mark.
That's all right. I mean, honestly, it's been an hour and 45, no, it's been almost 2 hours exactly. So with that, I'm going to say, if there's no further discussion, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. So what that means is that we've gotten some stuff done.
Yes.
How about that? And I thank you guys. Katie, again, we'll try to get you more busy next time. And Lieutenant, thank you so much. Your help has been invaluable. John
Thanks,
and
everyone.
Scott, I appreciate your patience and very much appreciate the fact that you lent your opinions to the proceedings. And we will convene again next Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And hopefully I won't be late. I'll know what my Zoom URL is and I'll be here on time. But till then,